We are live.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Republic Sunday morning hangout where a bunch of atheists get together and talk about stuff. And sometimes I have a voice, and today I don't, so you get to deal with that. That's good times. Today we're going to talk about exorcism. Why is it on the rise? What's going on with all of that? What do people think is happening? If you're watching live, thank you and welcome. You can ask questions on Twitter, hashtag Atheist Republic, at Atheist Republic. And if you are on the Facebook group or anything like that, you can also leave questions there. If you're watching this on YouTube, please feel free to leave comments and questions below. We love to hear from our community. And we always enjoy hearing from you on our website as well, atheistrepublic.com. Pop over there and see what's going on. We'll leave any links or resources that we talk about in this hangout in the description on YouTube. So if you're watching this and you missed something, go back to YouTube, or if you're watching it on YouTube, just look below. Everything should be down there. So let's get started. Sometimes we have people trickling in a little bit later. Today with us we have Allie, Casper, and Philippe, and again my name is Makisha. And we'll get started talking about exorcism and anything related like that. I have been watching a lot of Sleepy Hollow. I don't know if you guys know the TV show, Sleepy Hollow. I've been binge watching it. It's kind of one of my junk TV indulgences while I am working. And they have all of them on Hulu, so I'm watching all of them. And so exorcisms are like a real part of my life right now, especially when you watch 5 episodes back to back of like demon spawn and these people who have to fight them. So it's kind of a funny timing contrast matter. And also we've got TV shows like Supernatural and there's all kinds of things in the not just in the news but in TV and film in general that points to a kind of fascination with demons and supernatural possessions and things like that. So we can talk about why that is and how we can respond or what people's response to that might be. Casper, why don't you get us started? Share some of your thoughts. Or I'm trying to pull up these stories that we had talked about, so while you talk, I'll try to do that.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Sleepy Hollow and Supernatural because I watch those shows as well, and especially Supernatural. And to me, that's one of those things I love to point out, especially to moderate Christians. It's like if the Bible were true, that would be the world that we live in. So do you believe that that sort of world exists underneath the surface that we see every day? And it comes down to the idea that most people don't actually believe it. Your general average moderate Christian or Muslim or whatnot doesn't really believe that that's the world underneath the world, but yet their book says that's exactly what it is. So it's a strange thing to deal with, but because that's exactly what the Bible points to. I mean, Jesus supposedly performed exorcisms. Exorcism is actually a very long-standing tradition within the Catholic Church, especially. And then you have things like speaking in tongues and the existence of Satan. And it's weird to think that people actually believe there's this sort of demonic force that exists underneath the world that we see every day. And the question arises is why don't we see it? I mean, if that's the reality, why isn't it right out front? Why can't everybody see it? Why doesn't everyone experience that? Because I feel like personally, if I was to see actual demons present in this world or see Satan manifest in a physical form, then like, okay, I'm a believer. At that point, I believe. But it falls in line with angels and all the rest of the supernatural stuff. It's totally unbelievable because you can't see it. No one ever sees it. And even the people that think they see it can't substantiate that to any real degree.
I actually think one of the things that I've thought about, I come from a Pentecostal tradition where everything is spiritual and people get spirits casted out of them all the time. we don't call them exorcisms in that particular tradition. I believe that's a distinctly Catholic, possibly Eastern Orthodox, but definitely Roman Catholic word. But we do, you know, in the Pentecostal church there was or is spiritual battles, and literally, like, you can have a prayer meeting go on for hours and hours, praying for people and casting out demons and whatnot. In a way, I think that's more true and honest to people's beliefs, because I feel like if there are demons and spirits at work, why aren't people trying to get rid of those things all the time? I mean, man, be gone. I don't want that stuff around me if that's actually real. So it does make you wonder, like, how much do people believe that it's actually going on, or how much is it more when you feel like it's touching your life personally, you become involved, or if it reaches some sort of critical mass where they think, you know, this particular demon is causing somebody to do something or causing harm, then people all of a sudden get interested. It's sort of like how Armin says, you know, if people really believe in hell, evangelism really should be, proselytizing should be going on a lot more, with a lot more fervor, if people actually care and believe that all of these people are going to hell. It's kind of offensive to think that they don't care enough to try to save everybody. So I kind of thought that about exorcisms as well, or in terms of just responding to the supernatural in general. There have been, and I still can't find the story that made us really want to talk about this, but there have been some stories over the past year or so of some cases where priests have been arrested because they performed exorcisms. And what I find interesting about this is it tends to be priests with kids, priests with teenagers, pastors alone with women, and so maybe you guys can add some thoughts about that as well. Casper? Sorry, Cass.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to add another little aspect to this, because we look at say like no, sorry. we look at like Josh Duggar, and talking about his supposed porn addiction and stuff, and he tried to play that off on, like, you know, Satan influencing his life, and sort of almost a demonic sort of possession where he was driven to do that by some outside force. And I think that's really the biggest issue here, is that it offers a real scapegoat for a lot of people to worm their way out of personal responsibility for their actions, when they can just say, oh, well, you know, Satan got in my heart and influenced me to do this. And I think that's you know, the exorcism itself is a sort of weird and funny thing to talk about, but when you get down to it, it's the sort of scapegoat nature of this, where people can worm their way out of personal responsibility, that causes a real issue and makes it something that we should talk about.
Allie, go ahead.
Okay. So here in Austin, there's actually a religious group that gathers at a Starbucks nearby after their weekly get-together for religious purposes, and they actually perform exorcisms on each other there publicly at Starbucks. There's been video of this as well. I haven't seen it myself, even though I was right in Austin when it was happening. But a lot of people are they're doing more of a modern exorcism, right? So instead of doing what the Catholics used to do, you know, strapping someone down to a bed and doing all this, they've let exorcism kind of evolve into something new, and they're like, oh wow, this is great. This is really what exorcism is. We're driving out the theoretical demons that live inside of people, and it's, you know, to me that's so stretching it. we're getting to a point now where we're really stretching things to take things from the Bible and say, oh, exorcisms are a great thing. Look at what they can do for us now. I don't agree. I don't think that we need to be taking mentally stable and well people and publicly shaming them for things that they do, watching porn, enjoying sex. These are not things that we need to be publicly shaming others for, trying to drive those demons out of people. And so I think that it scares me to a degree that people use the Bible for justification on exorcisms, and they've evolved it into this new form of torture. So we've seen that. We've seen the modern exorcism. And also, you know, the sad part is we still have those old exorcisms. There was a teenage boy, again here in Texas, what is wrong with Texas, where this teenage boy, his mother found out he was gay. So she said, okay, you know, that's it. We're going to have you exorcised. And the preacher was all about it. And this was the thinking atheist, wanted to know what we could do to get him out of there. I wanted to know if he could come live at my house. I mean, I will take these kids in if they're going to be exorcised. What can we do to stop it? And then my state says, not only is it okay for parents to take their children and have them exorcised, you know, have an exorcism, but we're also going to make it legal for their parents to send them off to gay conversion camps. So that's what's going on in my state right now. And that's why the whole topic of exorcisms and stuff, it actually does mean a lot to me right now, because this is an issue that we are modernly facing. And I can't believe that I am saying in the year 2015 that exorcisms is an issue for us.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to some of what we've talked about before as well, which is the frustration of certain things being allowed within a religious context when given a religious excuse, when they're not allowed in any other context. In fact, in America in particular, I think there's certain things that are allowed in a Christian context that would not be allowed in any other religious context. And so there's a huge... It's not just a philosophical or a societal double standard, it's a legal double standard, which I think is profoundly problematic. When you say, well, if I were to claim to be, and this is another thing that's fascinating, if I said my family are Satanists and we're going to call upon demons and we're going to, you know, our kids are going to be there and they're going to chant and we're going to lay our hands on them and sprinkle blood on them, or maybe just water or whatever, people would be just appalled. They would call that, you know, abuse in the name of Satanism, and yet when Christians do the same thing, it's considered perfectly allowed. And I think Allie, you brought up a really good point with, particularly when it comes to kids. Not only do they not really have much of a choice, they're in a particularly vulnerable position, which brings up, I think, you know, the issue of vulnerability and why this happens to people. Philippe, I think you had something to say about that.
Well, yeah, it's very interesting to see that there is an increasing demand for exorcisms in Europe too. Meaning that, well, all the social studies say the same thing. It's because of the crisis. So when you have a crisis, a structural crisis in the society, well, things tend to be more like on the edge, and people seek reassurance and that sort of stuff. And it's, for example, you have the example of the Catholic Church has appointed a new branch to train more priests to be able to perform exorcisms. And I don't know if you have been seeing some real exorcisms, or old ones, or new ones, or whatever. It's in the social studies, it's very well known because the structure usually is very, very likely, meaning that you always find the same structure. That you have somebody who is victim of the demon, and the whole structure of the family point to this person, meaning everything is happening is because of this person. And when you see there is much more girls who need exorcisms than boys, that's have to be noted. And usually when you hear an exorcism, it's, well, every shrink will tell you it's just a crisis of hysteria. It's just a revolt that you can express in some other way. And that's the way a lot of girls are able to say to their mother, fuck you, go to hell, I want to have sex, you're a fucking whore, I hate you. If you say that in the middle of the kitchen and be very quiet and very nice and be very calm, that wouldn't work. You're not able to express exactly what you're thinking. But if you are in the bed and jumping all around and etc. and saying it's the demon, well, everybody says, oh, it's not her who is expressing herself, it's the demon. So what is said is very acceptable, and it's a way for the person to express what she had to express without having to face the consequences. And now again we go to what religion is about, is to oppress your real feelings and to take control of your feelings and the way you have to express them. Very interesting what Casper said at the beginning, because a lot of moderate Muslims really believe, absolutely really believe in angels and demons and the shaitan and some sort of ghouls, you know. It's very real for them. I have this. He's my superior in my job, and he's absolutely convinced that he have to fight all the demons and the little shaitans all day long, all the time. Every time he has a bad thinking, a bad thought about this, or he feels he didn't act in a good way, it's the shaitan. It's not him. It's the shaitan, always. And there comes the question of the free will. When the shaitan takes control of you, because exorcism is this, it's taking out a demon from your body. So you're not free to choose to do evil or to do good, because the demon is taking possession of you. So where is your free will?
Yeah, and along with that, from my experience in particular, is a huge burden of responsibility to do certain things or not do certain things in order to avoid getting taken over, which is not really in Pentecostal tradition. That's not exactly how it's explained, but a lot of it is that your mind is essentially the playhouse for demons, and your thoughts are what the devil can control. And so there's a huge burden put on people to remain pure, to keep your thoughts under control, to deal with your carnal nature. All of these things, you know, the carnal nature being anything that is us, that we consider to be us, that isn't spiritual. And so, especially as a kid, that was terrifying, because it was like, you know, if I think something this way or I don't do this, then I'm gonna be possessed or taken over by demonic thoughts or bad spirits or whatever. And I think that I find it particularly repugnant when we put that on vulnerable populations, kids, people who are in dire straits, people who are in, you know, tragic situations. That's the last thing I think they need. Casper and then Allie.
So I just wanted to add, because Philippe brought up another good point that I discussed in a blog called I'm a fucking wizard, which is, you know, who performs these exorcisms, and especially within the Catholic Church, we see that the person who performs exorcisms is always a priest, and that gets back to a point that I tried to make in that blog, which is that the whole idea of becoming a priest or a high-ranking holy man is basically you're becoming a fucking wizard. You can perform magic now, and you can do shit like exorcise demons from people, and fucking pray over some bread and wine and turn it into the body and blood of Christ. And it's such a silly fucking idea. It's like what I called it in the blog was wizard school for muggles, and that's basically what it is. It's people pretending to be wizards, and that's the silliest thing I've ever heard of in my life. What I mean, as a kid you might play at that, but as a grown adult to sit there and go, no, I have magic powers and I can cast out demons and I can transform these things into other things and perform alchemy. It's like, are you fucking for real? Because that sounds crazy to me. That sounds like an insane person to me.
I think that's a really good point. And some of these the talks about exorcisms remind me of like the stories of the Salem witch trials and stuff, you know. And I think the other thing that I find baffling is why people continue to turn to answers that aren't really answers, that we have no evidence for, that we can't see, that we can't actually deal with, when we have answers that we do know about. We have psychology, we have, which, granted, psychology is not a hard science all the time, but you know, we also have neuroscience, which is becoming a lot more involved in the way people behave, and I understand why spirits were blamed for people's behavior when we didn't have any other answers. I think that makes a lot of sense. But why this continues to be a problem, I think, is continuously just baffling to me. Allie, go ahead.
So I think that this continues to be a problem because you have to believe in demons if you're going to be a Christian, if you're going to be a Catholic, if you're going to be any, even Islam has their demons, right? Jinns. So you have to believe in demons if you're going to follow a religion. Otherwise, you have to say, okay, the New Testament is wrong. It lied. These things don't exist. So therefore, you know, there's a big problem in the Bible. And then you start thinking you can't have that if you're following a religion either. So that's why this is still a problem. Is in today's day and age, people need to figure out a way to make exorcisms make sense to them. And I think that's, you know, the modern exorcisms and how, you know, well, the demon is the addiction to pornography. The demon is the addiction to meth or heroin or whatever. And so they're modernizing it, trying to make it seem like, okay, demons aren't real, but these problems are real, and these problems are what Jesus actually exorcised from people. And no, that's not true. That's not true at all. And we also have a problem with, you know, we've got adults raising children to believe in ghosts and believe in demons. Growing up, I could talk all hour on the hilarious stories of my mother who strongly, with her entire life, believed in ghosts and demons. But she truly believed, when I was born, we lived in a house in Auburn, Alabama, and she truly believed that house was possessed by a demon. And I had 3 older brothers. One I still talk to, and I hope he doesn't watch this because he might get mad at me. But she had my brothers fully convinced that there was a demon in the house, and she had gotten to the point where she'd leave a recorder going at all times because she claimed to hear things, right? So the air conditioner would blow doors open and closed, and my brothers would see it and be like, Mom, the doors are opening and closing, and Mom would be like, that's the demons. And she truly believed that the house was possessed. Well, it got to the point where once she had a recording where, I mean, and to this day, we all fully know that my mother made the recording, but why she still believed, because she acted like she truly believed, that a demon got on the recording and started talking to her in a demonic voice through me. Right? Because you can hear me kind of babbling on the tape, and then this deranged voice comes up saying, the baby wants you to go to hell with us now, or something along those lines. And my mother truly in her heart believed that it was a demon, truly in her heart. My brothers, you know, were very scared. They were just children. And, so what she did was she raised 4 children to grow up into adults who believed in ghosts, and we believed it because we lived it, right? We had proof. We saw the proof. We felt the proof. It was all there. But obviously, I don't believe in ghosts and demons anymore. But my brother, a man into his late 30s, still believed in ghosts up until a little while ago when we had to have a conversation about. Could this have actually happened? If there were ghosts or demons, why don't they hurt people, right? Why aren't we seeing people hurt by these demons? Why aren't we seeing claw marks and bite marks and people having their throats ripped out by demons? Why aren't we seeing this stuff if they're real, right? Otherwise, we have to believe that ghosts are just walking around opening and closing cabinets. Is that really their afterlife? They just open and close cabinets? I mean, no, you can't possibly believe that. And, it takes a lot of time to kind of rule that indoctrination out of people once they grow up in a household where they, quote unquote, see it, where they believe it, they feel it. And that's why this is still kind of a problem, because we have these children growing into an adult who are still acting like children. And the only way that they have to kind of fix the problem is through the age-old exorcism, and it's scary. I just think the whole thing is very, very scary.
Thanks, Allie. We have a new member who has joined us, and I'm going to let him introduce himself because I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. And I'm also just going to remind anybody actually who joins here to mute your mic when you come on, unless you have something to say. But can you introduce yourself, please?
You're talking about me, right?
That's you.
Oh, okay. All over again, I guess. Hi, all.
You can just say your name. You don't have to say anything else if you feel like it.
Okay. Veton.
Say again?
Veton.
Thank you. Okay, welcome to Veton, and we might have other people popping on. We're coming up to about our half hour. But we've had people join as late as 10 minutes before we finish, so we might have more people join. If you're watching and you want to come on and participate, please join us, and remember to mute your mic when you come, just in case there's background noise. Okay, Philippe, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about maybe your thoughts about some of the psychology of this or whatever else you have in mind, and Veton, feel free to, I don't know if you have the chat in your sidebar. If you're on a cell phone, you probably don't, so you can just get my attention if you want to join in.
Okay.
So yeah, I was interested in the way things go around psychology and fundamentalism. It's very interesting to see that in those families, there is no question to believe or not to believe that demon exists. Well, if you believe in demons, then you have to believe in angels. If you believe in angels, just like Ali said, then everything takes sense, because everything makes sense. Sorry, because Gabriel exists, and so is the Virgin Mary, and etc. and etc. etc. And the whole chain of consequence is logical, and so it's a very good explanation or alibi for all you can believe in. Well, it's very interesting to see also that if you believe that a little piece of bread becomes the corpse of Christ, and wine is becoming really his blood, and that you believe that in blessed water and blessed metal, holy things, and whatever. Yeah, it is absolutely ridiculous, because it is magic. It's just plain ridiculous. But it's part of everything people genuinely believe. Really, even old society like France, people in the countries and people who believe in God and go to the Catholic Church actually believe in those things. And if you doubt about it, just look at some pictures of cities like Lourdes with the holy cave of the Virgin Mary, and you see everything that people are ready to buy to be protected from things or whatever. It's crazy superstition. Is just like throwing salt above your shoulder or things like that, or don't break the bread a certain way. It's absolutely ridiculous, but people actually believe in those bullshit. So how do you fight this besides skepticism and rationality and scientific education? Well, that's all you can do. And to talk about the psychology, it's very interesting to see that a lot of people don't go to see a psychologist or don't seek help when they have problems, just because they have this idea that you need a psychology, you need help in that matter only if you're mad. And I've known somebody, I was, get some help, talk to someone. And she was like, but I'm not mad, so I don't need a shrink, you know? I'm not mad. Yeah, but actually she's doing what she had to do. But it's very interesting that people are seeking answers because they are afraid to be said crazy because they go to seek medical aid in that field. So third thing, well, we're talking about exorcisms. Sometimes we're talking about exorcisms on someone, or sometimes exorcisms in places. So it's very interesting to see how priests and people who are performing the exorcisms are always trying to say, oh, if it's the body of a person, it's a demon, but if it's a house, a cave, or something, it's not a demon, it's a lost soul. I would be very interested to know how they can switch from one to another and decide that it's just someone who is sad or it's a demon.
I wanted to point out, sorry, I wanted to mention the article that I had referenced before. Thanks, Philippe, by the way. Sorry, my mind is always divided as I'm trying to kind of navigate all these things, but I think a lot of your points were really good, and the psychology of it I think is fascinating, particularly, again, it all comes down to just vulnerable people, and that's why I find it particularly repugnant. But the article I was referencing that I was thinking of is called Exorcism Thriving in the U.S., Say Experts, and it's from ABC News, and you can probably just search using that title, but we'll post a link below. There was also a reference to a book that was recommended in our group called Spirit Possessions and Exorcism, The History, Psychology, and Neurobiology, and that's by a group of academics. It's a pretty heady book, it looks like, but that was recommended and something that might be interesting if you find that stuff to be of interest. So, Casper, go ahead.
So, yeah, I had 2 points actually. First of all, just speaking on what Philippe was talking about with the psychology of things. For me, this is actually a really personal issue because I suffer from clinical depression and a mild form of schizophrenia. So growing up, it was very difficult for me growing up in a pretty fundamentalist Christian home, trying to even discuss these things with my parents and what's going on with me. And it was always sort of back on, well, you know, Satan's in your mind and Satan's manipulating you and blah, blah, blah. And so as a child, I never got the help that I needed. And it was only after years of drug abuse and ending up in prison, and when I ended up in prison, I had a bit of a breakdown and came to actually receive real mental help, and was able to deal with these issues. And you know, like you said, Makisha, it's repugnant. You get to that point where people are being abused mentally and emotionally because others don't want to understand that there's a real psychological or physiological problem that needs to be dealt with, and that makes it makes it really hard to deal with, but because people do miss out on the help that they need due to this fundamentalist viewpoint. And that sort of ties into my second point, which is talking about how all of this relates to fundamentalism's role in religion, because moderates will tell you that demons today, and it's not a physical thing, it's different, and it's a emotional or spiritual issue that goes beyond that. And I always like to point out, Jesus didn't cast demons out of a person into a bunch of pigs, and that was an emotional or spiritual thing. That was a physical act that Jesus supposedly performed by casting physical demons out of a person into a bunch of pigs and making them run off a cliff. Like that, according to the Bible, that physically happened. But moderates want to tell you, oh, well, there's a point where that doesn't, that stopped. And I'm like, well, no, look at the rest of the Bible. Jesus was gone for quite some time, and Paul was still performing exorcisms, Peter, all the rest of his disciples. So at what point did this stop? And you get to the Catholic Church, who continued the tradition and continues it today. So I don't think you can claim that there's a point where this supposedly stopped and it was always just a spiritual thing and we didn't understand it because it was metaphorical. It was never meant to be metaphorical. Jesus was a fundamentalist. He believed in Noah and the ark. He believed in the Exodus. He believed in actual physical demons. So who are you to say that Jesus was fucking wrong? Jesus believed this stuff. Can you say that Jesus was wrong? If you believe in Jesus, how do you do that? How do you make that distinction? So fundamentalism has a real role in even moderate religion, and that's something people don't like to address too often.
Yeah, it is interesting how the explanation of casting out of demons becomes more palatable as time goes on. It shifts to become not as extreme in a lot of cases. There's obviously exceptions, and the Catholic Church still maintains its particular formula. It has a very specific formula for exorcisms and rituals to perform and things like that. I'm pretty sure that's generally the same as it has always been. But the whole process has become, and in a way I think this is far worse, because it's become more mainstream, it's become more nice, and in a way it has started to try to look like counseling, or to look like therapy, or to look like group therapy, where people are experiencing sort of talk therapy in a group setting. And there are entire ministries that are devoted to this, prayer rooms and International House of Prayer and things like that have revealed a lot of abuse going on inside, but they are very approachable ways of accessing this sort of service that a ministry might provide. But what they often do is they sort of pose as medical professionals or as psychotherapy professionals without saying as much, but that's what people sort of think they're getting at first, and I think that it's much more devious in that way. And those are the sorts of things that we're seeing an increase of in America. Not so much stuff where people are casting out demons outside of Starbucks, although I think, as I'm really intrigued about that, because I don't quite understand what the point is of being out in public like that, but at the same time, I guess people are a little bit safer being in public than behind closed doors in terms of protected from abuse. But that's some of what this article touched on, as well as the type of exorcisms that are practiced in Protestant Christianity more in the United States. Welcome to Costas. I know you just joined us, but you are welcome to jump in anytime. Did you have anything to say about this subject right now, or did you want to wait and listen? Go ahead.
Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me properly?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Basically, what I wanted to talk about was obviously since the 70s, we've seen a major increase in in exorcisms all around the world, especially in the United States. Mainly, I read an article that talked about, mainly this was from I things like the cinema, comic books, things like that. The general public have been more introduced to the sort of thing through these types of media. So small things like your child behaving differently, your teenager behaving differently. A lot of these staunch Christian families started believing that maybe this child was, possessed by a demon or something like that. So the Vatican has actually released numbers that correlates to what I'm saying, that since the early to late 70s, they've seen a major increase, especially since the 1990s and the 2000s, in this sort of thing. Now, this is, I don't know, for me this seems silly because, obviously I don't believe in demonic possessions or anything like that. But for these people, seeing these movies, they actually believe them. It's similar to the Bible and things like that. Whatever they read, they believe at face value. So all these movies that are obviously fiction, they're seeing them and they see certain things in real life that reminds them of this thing. And, this is what they believe. I think people need to take a step back, need to be a little bit more open-minded about this, that obviously these movies, like, for example, The Evil Dead, which has seen resurgence now through the series that's been displayed, and take them as just, a good time, a horror movie or horror comedy or whatever it is, and not the fact that there's a resurgence of evil and that there's a Book of the Dead or anything like that, and that there's actual demonic things that are coming out into this world. Because some of these kids that are going through these exorcisms are actually mentally ill, and they need to see a psychologist or psychiatrist, and their parents are subjecting them to these things that the church does to them. And in a lot of cases, in extreme cases, we see that these people actually end up dying because they refuse to eat, they refuse to drink, and instead of getting the help that they actually need, what they're getting is some guy talking Latin to them and tying them to a bed, and where they, sorry, excuse my language, piss and shit themselves, and they end up dying from that, or they end up being caused serious mental damage that they can never come back from that. That's more or less what I have to say. If you guys want to carry on talking about that, I'll carry on in the chat. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Costas. Did anybody have anything to say, either in response to Costas, or you had something else you wanted to share? Philippe.
Yeah, the point Costas raised was quite interesting, but I have some questions about that, because I would say that it's something that you can observe in the Western world, because considering other cultures, it's not working that way. If you take, for example, traditional African culture, I bet they don't care about those movies they never saw, and still there was always kind of exorcism in the traditional culture, whether it's been animism or Christian or evangelical. It's something that is really part of the African culture, the fact that there is demon and you have to cast them out. So, there is also in those countries, in all Western Africa and South, a rise, an explosion of the numbers of exorcisms. So I would say it's interesting what you said about this popular culture, because it's been spreading this idea among the Western culture, but it seems that the state of crisis of the world and the fact that we all know what's happening all around with the internet, even in Africa, they know about what's happening in Paris or in Boston or whatever. It's perhaps just an hypothesis. Perhaps is pushing this idea that the apocalypse is really happening, because before you could have a slaughter over there, a terrorist attack over here, a plague in somewhere else, and basically the vast majority of the world wouldn't know if they were not directly concerned. Now everything, any event happening on the planet, everybody fucking knows in like 24 hours. Everybody knows about it, and it gives the sense for people who are in this kind of mind frame, that the apocalypse is really happening, and it's the demonstration that demons and whatever is happening. So there is a crispation, there is a tetanization about those ideas, and exactly when you have a crisis and it's mental health, etc., people don't even try to figure out that it could be this. It's demons. That's it, because the world is going to its end.
Costas, do you have anything to follow up with after that? Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, having come from Africa, I've seen a lot of these. I've seen some of these things firsthand. I think it's mainly the mix of the traditional culture being mixed with the modern culture. I mean, I know in certain countries, like even in South Africa, in the more rural areas, they still really believe in the old ways, mixed in with today's culture and with Christianity. For example, they'll believe in something called the Tsokolosh, which is like a demonic being that lives underneath your bed. It was basically, some of the more modernized Africans will see it as a children's story told to little ones to keep them, quiet and to keep them in bed and whatnot. But for others, they actually genuinely believe it. What's interesting about modern culture being mixed in with these more traditional cultures is, like, for example, I'm sure some of you have seen somewhere where they talk about the barcode, and how they talk about the barcode has the number 666 inside of it. I keep seeing this repeating again and again. I saw this for the first time in the mid-90s. I saw it towards the end of the 20th century, and obviously when we hit 2000 and then on, when they're talking about the end of the world and things like that, I started seeing it again. And I saw it again this year at some point, I think maybe a few weeks ago, where people talked about Revelations and how they talked about the end of the world is coming, and how they talk about that we're all branded because we're carrying these cell phones around that have little barcodes inside of them. So it's basically like people who don't use modern technology aren't in cahoots with the devil, and the rest of us all are. How we're all being led by him because of this amazing technology, and how some people still see modern technology as being demonic. It really depends on your cultural background, where you're coming from, and how you see it. For me, being brought up in a modern society with modern technology, things like that, I see it as laughable. Some of the Africans that Philippe mentioned, who are brought up in a more rural setting, will believe what they believe because that's how they were brought up. It's part of their culture. And even when you take into consideration modern culture being brought in, they still have this background, so they will still believe this sort of thing. That's basically what I had to say.
Thanks, Costas. I think this makes me, and maybe in our last 10 minutes or so, this brings me to thinking about how we individually, in our own experiences, in our own context, respond to these things when they come up in context of conversations, or maybe in the on our online life, when we're conversing with people on Facebook or whatever. How do you all respond to this, and how maybe do we as Atheist Republic, as atheists in general, address, because obviously some of this is just, some of it can be written off as superstition, it's all part of people's religion and whatever, but some of what we're talking about has farther reaching implications, and we're talking about things like legal protection for children and vulnerable populations, and making sure that people aren't taken advantage of, and those sorts of things. And we can say, I think a lot of this comes from definitely a place of fear. Philippe, I really resonated with what you were saying. I think there's a lot of desperation. I think people, particularly those of us who are exposed to the 24-hour news cycle, are feeling this sense that it is getting worse, because we're hearing it all the time. And is it getting worse? You know, I mean, I'm hearing statistics that point to a lot of things getting a lot better. But we do have this emotional reaction that makes us feel desperate, that makes us feel fear. And so knowledge and facts can overcome some of that fear, but the emotional feedback, the emotional experiences, I think, are what the spiritual and the religious communities are able to address that maybe we haven't quite figured out. And how do we combat that sense of hopelessness with people? You know, some of this is medical, some of it clinical, some of it is a person issue. So does anybody have any thoughts on that? How do you talk to the people you know about this if it comes up or when it comes up? Casper.
Well, but before I get to that and kind of to tie into that, I wanted to touch just a little bit on what folks, especially in relationship to Africans, from the standpoint of like your general idea of exorcisms from Catholicism and whatnot. And of course, those can be emotionally damaging to a lot of people. But it goes beyond that, and especially when we talk about Africa, some of the most horrible things I've seen in relation to these ideas is parents who murder their own children in Africa because the priest who's came into to the village tells them that their child is possessed by a demon, and it's because of that their whole village is suffering. So these people will turn around and pour acid down their own children's throats and murder them in order to supposedly help the village. And then we get to witch burnings. Witch burning is still going on in Africa right now in this day and age. And that all has a relationship to this. And I think Costas and Philippe made a great point. There is a culture clash there, and sometimes these priests that come in, they will take advantage of these people and play on their own fears that already exist, and then play on them in relation to the new religion that they're pushing on them, because the Bible does support the idea of witches and demonic possession. So it's easy to play on those fears that already exist and push them into a very dark place that can be just deadly for a lot of people. So I think that's where we see the real danger behind this. Exorcisms can be seen as something superstitious and funny, but it can go to a very dark place, like what we see in Africa with children being murdered. As far as how we deal with that and how we can combat it and how we can be involved in it, I think that bringing up issues like that is what we have to discuss. That's where we have to go with this and say, this is the dark side. This is how far it can go. And this is why we have to nip it in the bud before it ever gets to that point. You can't take this seriously. You can't. You can't latch on to fundamentalism, because that's where it leads. It leads to a very dark and dangerous place, and it's horrible for all of society. So I think one of the best talking points for us is to just point out this is where it can go. I mean, it's the same thing with Islam when we talk about terrorism. This is where it can go. It doesn't always lead there, and there are plenty of people who don't buy into it like that, but that's the darkest place. And I think when you go to the darkest place, people can start to see just how bad it can be and just how dangerous it can be, and maybe they take it a little less seriously.
Thanks, Casper. Sorry, a little coughing fit there. Philippe mentioned that in the sidebar that he uses statistics to sort of combat this, which I tend to do a lot as well, to help people see that things aren't really that bad, and if things really aren't that bad, then how can we maybe, how does that affect your perspective? How does that affect your fear? If you can think that things aren't as bad as they actually are. Also, just ways of explaining. Of course, it's tricky, because when I was growing up, everybody was very skeptical of psychology or doctors in general. So you really can't even talk about that with them. I had so many conversations later in my life about you know, these things that you're experiencing, maybe it's this. If you talk to somebody, oh, that's, you know, that's just all a scam. That's a, you know, they believe that everybody's in cahoots trying to lead us all to some, I don't even know what the purpose of that sort of scam would be, except obviously money, but, you know, they give their money to people who cast out demons, so I didn't really, you know, make that connection either. So obviously a lot of this is not something that we're going to convince people of, but it does make me, I guess I'm always intrigued by why people turn to these sorts of things, and maybe what they're not accessing, either services or information that they're not able to access in their life that's leading them to some other answer, and then how can there be a humanist response out of that can maybe meet some of these needs or provide some of these answers. We have about 5 minutes left. If there's any closing thoughts or anything else, even maybe unrelated, that somebody wanted to talk about in our last few minutes before we wrap up. Casper.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I've been a bit talkative today. I've had a lot on my mind. I'm kind of dealing with some depression issues myself, and it helps to get some of these things off my chest. But you know, I think, like I said, one of the main points and one of the main talking points here for us to discuss is that this is not something that's benign. It's dangerous. It's dangerous for people to take these ideas seriously. It can cause real harm, physical harm in people's lives and to society in general and to humanity as a whole. And that's the horrible side of it. And you know, it's sad that we need to go there, but that is where we have to go. I believe personally, because there's real danger. There's real people in real danger due to these ideas, and it's terrible for people.
I agree. Any other thoughts or feedback, questions? Any Atheist Republic news that we want to close out with? All right, let's wrap it up then. We have a small group today, so I'm always impressed when 3 or 4 people and a few others that tag on later can fill up an hour. So yay, yes. And some of us not fully at 100%, I think, this morning. So thank you for joining us today. And next week we're going to talk about the historicity of religious figures, particularly Jesus, Muhammad, the questions that have been raised, the controversy around whether they actually existed, things like that. And we'll kind of suss out the details of that in our Facebook group and then pass on that information. Usually it's all at the last minute, so I know most of these are viewed on YouTube after the fact because we don't really put a lot of information out there ahead of time. But that's probably what we're going to be addressing next week. And thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you for supporting Atheist Republic. As usual, I will wrap up by letting you know you can leave comments down below. You can email us. You can go to our website, atheistrepublic.com. We have all kinds of resources there. If you are dealing with this issue in your own life, exorcisms, things you've dealt with maybe in the past or things that your family is currently doing, you want to talk about it, we have forums there. We have support groups, we have the Facebook page, we have all kinds of ways for you to get involved. We have local cohorts. Check all that stuff out at atheistrepublic.com. Get involved. We love our volunteers. We have a lot of fun. If you'd like to join us by writing, editing, doing anything like that, you can do that through our website. If Atheist Republic is of value to you, please consider financially supporting us. It does take money to make this happen. And we want to continue making it happen because we continue to hear from people that Atheist Republic matters to them. And they feel less alone. They know that they have a community that they can rely on, and it is important to them. So please support us in any way that you can. We appreciate it, and we appreciate you. Thanks for joining us. See you again next week.